Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast, which is brought to you by MFP Wealth Management. This week, we are discussing the difficult topic of care planning. Now, as my role at MFP, I'm a financial planner, and we help people often with, the challenges faced around finding care for someone they love. And they often come up against barriers or difficulties in doing so, which is why I'm delighted to welcome Jacqueline Berry to the podcast this week. Jacqueline is the founding director of My Care Consultant. Now, My Care Consultant is a market-leading expert providing care planning guidance to people and their families who need help preparing for or setting up care. So welcome, Jacqueline.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having me.
No. Well, I'm really, I know this topic is very present in our audiences' in minds, having to, as if they've got to find care for someone, or just the idea that they may need it themselves one day. And then we read in the press, don't we, God knows, awful horror stories about provision of care, or how you find care, or what you can claim for and what you can't and what you're entitled to. And so someone like yourself who understands all this is, just fantastic.
Yes, no, I would agree. I think we call it the care maze. Sort of many people and their families tend to be scrambling around from one source to another, trying to find answers and information desperately on behalf of themselves or a loved one. So it's really important that people get access to the help they need, certainly at this time.
So, I mean, how did you get into this? Is there a personal experience that kind of got you interested in this area?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. My background from a business perspective comes from sort of working with a large insurer of later life insurance products, including long-term care annuities. And I worked there for a number of years, specialising in helping financial advisors expand on the provision of care advice for their clients.
Right.
And what became very apparent is obviously there is a huge need and value in getting financial advice around paying for care, but the actual care advice remit is much more broad than just paying for care. And for financial advisors, it's often very complicated and time consuming to provide everything in-house that their clients need. So we set up My Care Consultant with the view to support consumers, but also professional connections of ours like financial advisors, solicitors, care providers, anybody that's in engaging with people and their families that need care, that perhaps would like to get sort of information and support from a safe space. Really, normally they need that very quickly. So that's what we do, and that's why we set the business up. I have also had personal experiences myself interacting with the care system. My grandmother sort of had an experience a number of years ago. This is way before I was actually involved in care, and all I remember was just how confusing it was and actually quite stressful. So there's two reasons there as to really what drives us to running the business and helping people get better outcomes.
Sure. So, if someone, I mean, not everyone has access to financial advice and solicitors and all these people, so let's say you've got an elderly couple who suddenly realizes that one of them going to need some help.
Yes.
What do they do?
Yeah, I mean, there are some really, there is a sort of a route in place for those people. They can speak directly to their local authority.
Right.
And you can find your local authority by typing in your postcode. If you go into Google or something, just type in "find my local authority" and it'll bring up a link, and you type in your postcode. It's a government link, and you would contact them directly and ask for a needs assessment. So that is an assessment about looking at the care needs that you have. That's totally separate to
and most people, Jacqueline, I presume, of course, even if they haven't got access to computers, will know that they pay their council tax to that local authority. So call the people who you pay your council tax to.
Yes, very good point, Justin. Absolutely. Whoever you're paying your council tax to, that's your local authority responsible for helping you access the care you need.
Right. And then what happens next?
Yeah, so what happens is the local authority will arrange a care assessment, usually within 28 days. Every local authority has their own standards, but if it is urgent, of course, you can arrange for that sooner. They often come out to see you in person, and they will do an assessment with you, and we recommend your loved one or family members who can attend and input into that assessment. They will look at what your day-to-day needs are, how those needs are best met, and they'll provide a recommendation in the form of a report which outlines all of those things I've mentioned, with an inclusion of a recommendation around who you can actually contact, for example, a care provider that can offer you those services, whether that's at home, in a care home, or otherwise. After that's been done, they will then look at who pays, and that's where there's a financial assessment to work out that aspect of it.
Right. And this is probably the thing that worries a huge amount of people, is like, well, okay, so how's this going to be funded?
Yes.
Do we do it from our own resources, or will we get some help from our local authority?
Absolutely. And quite frankly, most people will contribute something towards their care, regardless of how much they have in savings, because firstly, they'll look at your income. So depending on whether you're living at home or in a care home, you're allowed to keep some of your income to pay for things like food and bills if you're at home, for example. The rest of your income will go towards your care fees. If there is still a shortfall, that's when the local authority will look at, okay, who pays for that shortfall? Is it you? Is it us? Is it a combination of the two, or indeed a combination of the two of us plus the NHS? And that's where the conversation around, is your need of a social care nature or a health care nature? And that again causes confusion with many of the people that we're dealing with.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. So social care or healthcare, could you could you try and explain the differences between those two concepts?
Yes, absolutely. The social care side of the care system that I've just alluded to refers to sort of day-to-day social needs. So, for example, things like getting up in the morning, getting washed, getting dressed, moving from room to room, going to the toilet, things that don't require necessarily a registered nurse to help you do. Social care is the remit of the local authorities and is means tested. It has always been means tested, and I think this is a real misconception probably with many of our listeners today, and certainly clients that we're dealing with, you know, and have been for years, who don't realise that social care is not free, and actually the likelihood of needing it is quite high, and the cost of it can be quite high. So that's social care. On the other hand, nursing care refers to people that have a primary health need, which essentially is care needs driven by sort of an illness or a disease that needs to be treated, essentially more complex needs. And there is a separate assessment for that, which is conducted by the NHS, and they have bodies called clinical commissioning groups, which quite simply are the alternative to local authorities on the NHS side of things. And they will assess you, and they are responsible for administering the funding if you qualify for that. Again, there is a fully funded package, which is called continuing healthcare, and there is a part funded package, which is the funded nursing payment. So that's for people that have healthcare needs, but perhaps they're not as complex as somebody who qualifies for the full free package of care under the NHS.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, you know, I think that someone phoning up the local authority has probably already identified that they need some help. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the call.
Yes, of course.
And in fact, in my experience, people call. They don't call early. They call later on. You know, they call when it's got to the point where they think, I can't cope any longer. And then let's say the local authority does come out and assess them, and then says, yeah, you know, you do need some help, and you know, etc. And they may provide a list of people who can help, you know, care providers. But how on earth? I mean, that seems yet again another minefield. I mean, most of us,
yes,
touch wood, haven't ever had to go in. You know, we may have hired a gardener, or we may have hired a decorator to paint a bedroom or something, but we've never hired someone to come in and help us, you know, with our, you know, making the bed or helping us get to the toilet.
Yes.
You know, how on earth? I mean, that seems a frightening place to be as well.
Yes, yeah, it is frightening, but the local authorities, to be fair to them, they do a good job in terms of assessments, where they look at what somebody's day-to-day needs are. And even our clients that are paying for themselves, we always say, it's great to deal with the local authorities and get a benchmark in terms of what your actual needs are, even though you might decide to set it up and pay for it independently, essentially just to get an understanding as to what you need and how those services are best administered. The problem with consumers, as you've just touched on, Justin, is most people don't plan for care. We'd be here all day if I sort of considered why that is, but essentially most behavioural studies that I've seen tell us that it's just human nature. Most people don't want to think about it. I completely understand that mentality, and most people, as I said, don't realise it's not free if you need social care, and they don't realise the likelihood of needing it. So what happens is they're dealing with a critical need. Often it's family members making decisions on behalf of loved ones, and the local authorities do a very good job. But essentially what we believe people need is actually everything pieced together with a route forward. So not just about what's the situation now from a care and funding perspective, but what happens if my needs change, if my partner's needs change, if I move out of my house, if my partner moves out of my house, how does that all impact on me? And how does that impact, financially, when people have clearly got, savings that have been very hard earned? So we essentially offer that service, as I said, from a safe space that sits outside of the local authorities, NHS, care providers, professional services like financial advice and legal advice, to help the client take a step back and actually plan a route forward in a safe space.
Sure. So coming back to the key aspect of actually choosing who's going to do the care, is that something that you help with?
Yes, of course. We are not
how do you how do you know if I've got someone if someone in Christchurch here in Dorset needs how do you find a good service provider?
Absolutely. So we're a nationwide business operating across England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. We've spent a great deal of time checking out services across the UK, ranging from care providers at home, care homes, and also local support services and charities. Had a client the other day who wanted access to a local taxi service that could take her husband in his wheelchair, that could perhaps be available at relatively short notice because they struggle to plan. So really what I'm saying here is that we will ask the client, we have a detailed fact find, we find out about their bespoke needs and wishes, and we draw upon our list, our library of contacts to provide to them based on their bespoke needs. But what we are not is a specialist care search service. There are specialist companies that exist to do that, and we will signpost our clients to that service if we feel it's relevant.
Right. Sure. And of course, I think especially as the confusion comes around, doesn't it, as people get what area is social needs and what area does it cross over to, with dementia becoming more and more prevalent in the UK, and is that is that a healthcare need, is this a social need, and who's paying what, and then understanding what you can claim for, but then understanding how often you should get assessed, and then obviously your health can decline, you could also improve, and then of course your needs change, don't they? So it's really is a difficult place.
I think firstly, just what listeners might find useful is that you touched on dementia, and of course we know that there is an increasing need as we're aging and living longer, many of us in relatively good health way past retirement. Dementia is an increasing condition that people are living with often for many years. The access to health, continuing healthcare is not dependent on diagnosis alone. It's based on your needs and sort of your individual complex needs, not on have you got dementia, have you got Parkinson's, for example. It's based on how that's impacting you and what your needs are as a result. What I would recommend to people is anybody that is being discharged from hospital that has relatively complex needs, anybody is entitled to ask for a continuing healthcare assessment. The first stage of the assessment is a checklist assessment, which is essentially a quick spot check to look at whether you're you have complex enough needs to go through to that full assessment. The worst that can happen is that you'll just be told, well, you're not actually ill enough and here's your checklist result.
Right.
But absolutely, the main thing is that people ask for it, and the worst that can happen is that they're told they don't qualify. There is another point to add, in that some people are told they don't qualify, and actually there is a bit of a grey area as to whether that's the right result. And again, there are services that are available that can help people essentially revert back and ask for a reassessment and how to position their case. We get involved in that, but we are not a legal specialist. We would again signpost clients to one of our legal specialist contacts if we felt that was appropriate for them.
Right. Yeah. So you can really provide a helping hand for people trying to navigate this, what sounds like a bit of a minefield, really.
Absolutely, Justin, and that's it. We call ourselves care navigators. It's a relatively new breed of sort of specialists, but essentially we'll sort of put everything together for the client and signpost them to the relevant specialist at the right time, with that continual touch point to us throughout their care journey. So if they have questions along the way, they can come back to us. It's just so important because this is such a big decision for people. I saw a recent survey that said, setting up and paying for care is, for many people, the second largest expenditure in their lives behind setting up a mortgage. So obviously you've got that financial element, but you've also got that emotional element of, it's upsetting for people. It can often be very stressful. There can be mixed emotions, even guilt, because again, decisions are being made on behalf of a loved one. So it's really important people get access to, good quality information and guidance at a time like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking about a client of ours who in fact, it was a solicitor who came to see me, and they came to see me about a pension, actually, about a relative's pension, because this relative had become very poorly, and was, it was being cared for by his mum. And he was in his 50s, so I don't know how old his mum was, but she was obviously in her 80s, so that was quite challenging. And I said, people often think it's just going to be elderly people, and I said, well, has he been assessed? Because I appreciate we might be able to claim on the pension early through an ill health payment and this type of thing, but actually, has he been assessed for continuing healthcare? And it turned out that he hadn't. And they went back to the social worker, would it have been, maybe?
Yes, likely.
Worker.
Yes,
and said, look, can we get an assessment for this continuing healthcare? And they went, yeah, no problem, we'll get that done. And then, a few, I don't know how many weeks later, but a number of weeks later, there was a back payment, and the NHS continuing healthcare stepped in, and then therefore the claim on the pension hadn't got to be made. So the right care was put in place, and the mum, hadn't got to do so much, which I think in her 80s was probably the worst, the last thing she wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to note, really continuing healthcare is available for the most complex of cases. So again, if we're dealing with clients and they're telling us mum's at home and mum's, needs a bit of help getting up in the morning and washed and dressed, we can tell you straight away that's not going to qualify for nursing, continuing healthcare under the NHS. The other really important point to add is continuing healthcare, even if it is awarded, is not necessarily permanent. Somebody could improve in the same way a young person could develop a condition, for example, and go into hospital and receive free healthcare under the NHS, and once they're recovered, they obviously discharged and they live their lives as normal. So as somebody goes through that care journey, it's important that they access what they should and they deserve, but it's not necessarily a permanent free benefit under the NHS. It is for people with complex health needs. But as I say, I would urge people, whether it's somebody with complex needs, they can go direct to their clinical commissioning group to set up or request an assessment. The quickest route is to the GP. They are connected to their local clinical commissioning groups, and you can ask your GP to arrange this assessment for you. And quite frankly, the GP should say to you, you've got no chance, it was a waste of time, or actually, absolutely, we will set it up for you. That's what they're there for.
Right. And so, this has been fascinating, chatting to you, Jacqueline. What are the most common things that you get asked for?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, you mentioned it earlier, it's critical need. It's people that are usually either being discharged from hospital, or sadly, mum's at home or dad's at home, or husband or wife are at home, and maybe they're not coping in the same way they used to. For example, somebody may have gone home for Christmas and realised that mum or dad is not, coping in the same way they were. Sorry, I'm just rearranging my microphone here. And what they need is they need to understand what they can access to help mum, but also what's free, what's available via the local authority and NHS. So the most common things would be somebody being discharged from hospital, somebody wanting to understand how that process works, the appropriate process of a hospital discharge, not just hospital discharge, and also mum or dad that's at home. So things like what providers are there locally to provide the care, how much does it cost, who pays, if it's me, how do I pay, and what about that ongoing planning? So if I develop more complex needs, how do I access an assessment for NHS continuing healthcare, who do I speak to, and ultimately if I'm paying, how best do I pay for that? So I can afford my care for longevity, but also ideally protect some of my hard-earned savings, so I can leave a legacy to my family. So they're the sort of things people are worried about. But as I say, most of the time it's dealing with that critical need first, getting mum safe and well, and then we look at that longer term plan, once that care is in place with our help via the local authority or an independent provider, for example.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, that's been absolutely fascinating, Jacqueline. Now, I can imagine that lots of people will want to take down how they would contact you and where they can find out more about you. So, how would someone do that if the need arises?
Yes, absolutely. So we have our website, which is www.mycareconsultant.co.uk. We have our contact details on there. We have a help desk, which is manned between 9 and 5:30 on work days. So people can contact us either via phone or via email. The details are on our website, and we will respond to people within one working day. Just to add, we do offer a initial free 15-minute call to all new inquiries. It's so important because some people will have some urgent questions, and we can answer those for them and give them an initial course of action, and we'll obviously highlight any obvious issues in that 15 minutes. Some people, that's all they need, and we will be very honest with them and send them on their way. If somebody needs more support, often life is more complex than just asking a few questions, then we do have our chargeable services, very affordable, very accessible, and as I said, we charge directly, so we're sort of an unbiased, safe space to offer our clients help and information. So I'd urge people to go to our website and get in touch with us if they are in a position where they just need a little bit of help. We're here to help.
Great. And as a last point, and I know you introduced me to this last week, that your website also has an area available for financial advisors who want to operate in this area, but maybe not feeling, totally up to speed with all the changes in legislation and the the ongoing kind of shifting sands, I suppose, of care provision. So do you want to quickly talk about that?
Yes, I'll just touch on that. That's called Carebox, Justin. We recently launched Carebox, which is our online support resource for financial advisors on care and paying for care. It's designed for all financial advisors, whether you're a care specialist, perhaps you're a member of the Society of Later Life Advisors, or you're a member of the Later Life Academy, and you want to keep up to speed with the topics that are involved when dealing with clients. So, the 12-week disregard, local authority assessment process, things like deliberate deprivation of assets, how does that work? Paying for care, the 9 different ways to pay for care. The list goes on. There's tools, support information, and a whole sales toolkit to help advisors in that area. On the other end of the scale, if you're an advisor that perhaps is not involved in this area, you might be listening and thinking, well, I'm a specialist mortgage or equity release provider. You will have clients with family members that need this help. So Carebox is designed to help instigate initial conversations and identify a need, and then hand off to a specialist, whether it's a navigator like us or another specialist financial advisor, for example, at the right time. So it really is a diverse tool that's available for all financial advisors in this space or looking to develop in this space.
Great. So that's a really good resource that I know that I'll be a Society of Later Life advisor, I'll definitely be using to keep myself up to speed.
Yes.
Speed.
I think I can say on here, we've got lots of Society of Later Life advisors that are currently either signed up or engaging our free trial, because feedback's been that it's very, very useful to save them time, essentially, keeping up to speed with everything that's changing. Just to let the listeners know, the web address is careboxonline.co.uk, so they can access a 1-month free trial on there. And following that, if they want to sign up, I mean, we're talking about the cost of a coffee once a week for membership to access ongoing material that's added to each month.
Great. Well, I'll put all the details in about my care consultants and how people might be able to access you, and how you can help people in the show notes, theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you'll also find all the useful links that we've talked about. So thank you so much for your time today, Jacqueline. That's been really, really fascinating, and I'm sure lots of people find it really, really useful.
No, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Justin.
My pleasure. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave a review on iTunes. It really does help other people find us and gain access to some good advice by searching for the Retirement Cafe podcast, or subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. You can also continue the retirement conversation with us on our Facebook page. Simply search for the Retirement Cafe. So until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.